Hi everyone, welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing another one of my 5 book recommendations within a certain genre or theme videos, which, if you're new and you've never seen them before, is just a little series that I do here on my channel, which I absolutely love filming videos for. And today I'm going to be talking to you all about fantasy. So in this video, I'm not just going to recommend fantasy strictly, but also some magical realism and things like that. Basically just all kinds of different magic in books. And I wanted to do this so that if epic high fantasy isn't your thing, but you do like a little sprinkle of magic in your books, then hopefully there should be something here for you. Basically, whatever level of magic you like in your books, hopefully I should have you covered. I actually don't have the physical copies of the books I'm going to be talking about with me here today because I am moving out of this uni house soon, so I've slowly been trying to send as many books back home as I can, so there's not too many to take back in the final trip. And so I'm going to have to insert pictures for you in this video. I hope that's okay. So the first book that I want to recommend for you today is Stardust by Neil Gaiman. This is a high fantasy, but it's a very short little book, and it's actually a standalone as well, which is quite unusual for high fantasy. This novel follows our protagonist, Tristan Thorne, who is a young man who ventures away from the small rural town in which he lives into the unexplored and magical lands of fairy. So Tristan is going on this journey because he wants to bring back a fallen star to Victoria Forrester, who is a young lady who is beautiful, and he wants to win over her heart. But naturally, Tristan isn't the only creature who is looking for this star. Stardust is actually one of my favourite ever novels. It is such a truly magical novel, filled with so many wonderful traditional fairy tale tropes, which I love, but it's also very dark at the same time. This one is definitely an adult fantasy novel. So this novel is told through an omniscient narrator, which definitely gives it a very traditional fairy tale story-like feel. And the writing is really whimsical and rich and vivid, and there's lots of use of colour in its imagery. And it also uses a lot of other fairy tale techniques, like groups of 3. So there are 3 witches in the novel, and there are also 3 heirs to the Palace of Stronghold. But it is also full of sex and violence and swearing and all the really traditional fairy tale-like themes juxtaposed with these really dark adult themes just make for such a wonderful, a really satisfying read. I would say this novel is perfect for you if you're wanting something magical and imaginative, but you're not wanting to commit yourself to a hefty high fantasy trilogy. Also, if you've never read any Neil Gaiman before, then I would say this is the perfect place to start. Next, I'm going to recommend The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, and this is the first novel in a hefty high fantasy trilogy. This novel is told as a story within a story. The majority of the novel is the autobiography of our protagonist, Kvothe, as he tells us about his childhood being brought up with travelling musicians to when he was a teenager and was admitted into the university, which is a renowned school for magic. But we also get to see Kvothe as he is now. He's a subdued and quiet innkeeper who is going by a different name, and so naturally throughout the books we're trying to figure out how Kvothe ended up the way he is now. So this is the novel you need if you're wanting some wonderful, gripping, fully fleshed out fantasy that will really draw you into its world. The world building in this novel is absolutely spectacular. It's some of the best high fantasy I've ever read. The unnamed fantasy world in this novel is combined with a mixture of traditional fantasy elements with modern day living, which I really, really enjoy. And there's lots of different elements to it that make it seem really fully realised. So there's different cities and different aspects to its magic systems, and there's lots of different stories and myths that go along with the world as well. The magic system in this trilogy was one of the highlights of it for me. It's a very unique, almost academic form of magic system that's underpinned with a lot of scientific principles, which I just think is fascinating. Patrick Rothfuss is honestly just such a wonderful storyteller. His world and magic system are brilliant, his characters are flawed and multi-dimensional, which I always really appreciate, and his writing is a perfect balance of being simple, but also relatively fast-paced and exhilarating. I couldn't recommend this more highly. The next book that I want to recommend is The Little White Horse by Elizabeth Goudge. This is a standalone novel and it's a classic children's fantasy story. So this novel tells the story of a young girl called Maria Merriweather who is orphaned and goes to live at Moonacre Manor, which she absolutely loves and thinks is perfect. But a sad tragedy actually occurred there years and years ago and kind of keeps its shadow over Moonacre Valley, and Maria takes it upon herself to learn what happened and to try and fix it. So this is actually one of my mum's all-time favourite books, and I love it as well. I've read it a few times now, the first time being when I was quite young, and I enjoyed it just as much then as I do now. It's just so charming and brilliant for people of all ages. This book just has everything that you would want a magical children's book to have. It has friendship and tragedy and magic and unicorns. It's perfect, and the writing is absolutely beautiful as well. This book is fast, it's delicious, you should read it. The fourth book that I want to recommend for you today is The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. So this novel tells the story of a middle-aged man who returns to his childhood home to attend a funeral, and when he returns, so many childhood memories come flooding back to him, and these memories include the memory of a young girl called Letty Hempstock and her mother and her grandmother, and the memories are very strange and quite frightening. This novel is bizarre and wonderful. The prose is just spectacular. The way that Neil Gaiman manages to turn words into vivid images and memories that almost seem real is just amazing. Neil Gaiman is just generally a really wonderful magical writer. I mean, he's already featured on this list twice. He just has a really fable-like storytelling that is just as present in this novel as it is in the more overtly magical Stardust. If you haven't read much fantasy before, but you're kind of wanting to experiment in that field, then I'd say this one is perfect for you. But equally, if you really enjoy literary fiction and you really like experimental writing, then I would also highly recommend this one. And my final recommendation for you today is His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman. I'm sure you've all heard of this trilogy before, but I truly think it's wonderful and I had to mention it. So this is a children's / YA high fantasy trilogy that I think can be read by anyone of any age. So in this world, humans have demons, which are basically creatures that reflect a person's inner being. So it's kind of like your soul that exists in creature form and goes everywhere with you. And there is also a phenomenon called dust in this world, which may have the power to unite the universe with another universe that is existing parallel to it. And our protagonist in these books is Lyra, and we just follow her adventures in this world while she's a young girl. So these novels are just so rich and detailed and fully fleshed out, but they're also just really exciting, plot-driven adventure stories. There are also just so many themes explored in these novels, including adolescence and love, and also aspects of theology, cosmology, and physics as well. I honestly think that this is one of the best YA fantasy trilogies out there, and I would highly recommend it to everyone. So those are 5 of my fantasy magical book recommendations. I really hope you enjoyed and found something that sparked your interest. If you've read any of the 5 books that I mentioned, I would love to know what you thought of them down below in the comments. And if you've got any good fantasy or magical realism recommendations that you think I'd like, then please be sure to let me know that as well. So that's all for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really do appreciate it more than you know. And hopefully I'll see you all next week with my next video. Bye.